This video talks about a game that is very graphic and has a lot of adult themes. If you're not comfortable with that, this video may not be for you. This game is pretty fucking raw, so viewer discretion is advised. Back in 1997, a game called Diddy Kong Racing was released. It was a game where Diddy Kong and friends raced each other in different vehicles. Some good old Nintendo fun. The game of course had a very bright and colorful cast of different animals you could play as. But one of them isn't like the others. This character would get to be in his own game after Diddy Kong Racing. And that game is all about getting drunk, killing people, musically talented pieces of shit, and a lot of other fucking nonsense. It was the completely fucking insane N64 game, Conker's Bad Fur Day. Conker might be one of the most entertaining rabbit holes I've found myself down. Bad Fur Day is a game that is just completely batshit insane with its plot and jokes. And if you haven't already, I recommend playing the game or at least watching all the cutscenes on YouTube. It's that entertaining. But today we're going to be talking about its scrapped sequel, which does mean I will be spoiling bits of the first game, because it is a sequel. I have to refer back to the first one for context. So if you don't mind that, you can stick around. If you want to watch it, then come back. That's okay too. But enough talking. Long ass intro over. This is Conker's Other Bad Day. Honestly, from what I've seen, not many people have talked about it. At all, really. You can definitely find stuff about it online by just like fucking Googling, but in terms of YouTube, I haven't been able to find a full-on deep dive on the subject, which inclined me to find out more about the game myself. It seemed very elusive to me. And after reading for a while, yeah, I'm fucking glad I looked into it. It's fucking absurd. It's funny as fuck. So I'd like to share it with you. We're going to be going over the entire plot that we know of, which was all posted by the director and lead designer of the game, Chris Seavor. So, without further ado, let's talk about the story. The prologue mirrors the first games, having Conker sit on the throne and ready to tell you about one of the worst days of his life. But Conker looks slightly different than we remember it, being slightly gray as wearing an eye patch. And he states to the player, "Well, there I am, Emperor of the known universe, and who'd have thought that?" This presumably would have played out pretty much exactly the same as the first games, where the game you're about to play is you going through Conker's awful day he was just mentioning. So, let's find out what really happened to Conker on this other bad day. After becoming king of all the lands in Bad Fur Day, Conker uses his powers very wisely, and spends all of the kingdom's treasury money on beer, parties, and this makes all of Conker's subordinates very upset, so they actually revolt and throw Conker into jail, which is how the game starts. You play as Conker in this tutorial level of leaving the castle with a full-on fucking ball and chain on your heel. And in the Conker's Other Bad Day document posted by Chris Seavor, there's a bunch of gameplay ideas that would have gone in this prison escape section. I'll put them on screen here. I don't want to bore you to death by just explaining gameplay, so if you are curious, it is here, but we are going to move on. But in the tutorial there are some story elements, so let me go over those real quick. Berri from the previous game is back, but has changed his name to Beardy. He's actually chained onto the fucking wall for disorderly behavior, but that doesn't stop him from being the tutorial guy just like the first game. The reason he's teaching you again is because Conker banged his head on a fucking wall or some stupid shit, so Conker forgot how to play the fucking game. Using one of the context zones that Beardy teaches you about, you're able to pick the lock on your ball and chain and get it off you. With Conker's chain now off, he's able to progress through the castle. He actually sees some familiar faces that have been locked up in the prison as well. Ron and Reg from the first game are locked up, as well as the Bee King. The reason they are locked up though is unknown. There's also a new character that has been locked up, his name being Camembert. He's a French resistance cheese. He's kind of just there for now, but we'll get back to him later. Conker faces his final challenge to escape, a big gargoyle holding a boulder, so naturally Conker's first idea is to grab a slingshot and shoot the gargoyle in the balls. This allows Conker to progress into the castle itself, which acts as the main hub that connects every level. Now that we're out of jail, let me quickly tell you about Conker's new design. He now owns shorts and looks slightly more mature. It's pretty cool overall. I like it. Chris Seavor seemed to like it as well because this design wasn't even unused. In the Bad Fur Day remake, Conker Live and Reloaded, he actually dresses with the same clothing that's used in this artwork. And don't worry, I'm not completely wasting your time talking about his design. On this page it also shows a little bit more story context. Other Bad Day takes place a couple years after Bad Fur Day, And after being king for so long, he's literally just bored as fuck, which is why he, had the parties. And he said more mature language since the last game. But the most important part of this page in the document is how it says that while he was king, he used his wealth to build a statue in honor of his dead girlfriend Berri. She passed away in Bad Fur Day, and he still mourns her death years later. But enough of that. Let's move on to the next chapter in Conker's Day. As we know, the Panther King died in the first game, but that doesn't mean he can't come back. It's been established if you die in Bad Fur Day, you get sent to the basement, which is pretty much just the place after death in the Conker world. After the Panther King dies in Bad Fur Day, he naturally also gets sent to the basement, and then meets the Grim Reaper, Greg, just as Conker did in the first game. The reason Conker didn't stay dead in Bad Fur Day is because according to the powers that be, squirrels can have as many lives as they think he can get away with, which really pisses off Greg. He was also shown to hate cats in Bad Fur Day for the whole having 9 lives thing. Just a major pet peeve for him, I guess. Because of that, Greg despises Conker. Having multiple lives and generally just being a dick makes Greg loathe him. So, the Panther King and Greg have a mutual hatred for Conker, so they decide to do something about it. Greg tells the Panther King that if he can get Conker to die somehow, he will let him escape the basement and be granted life again. Greg helps him a little, and discovers a secret clause in his deep dark library, which states that a squirrel can die if decreed by a state execution, and only then by beheading. With that knowledge in his head, the Panther King gets to work. He hires the Weasel Boss and tells him to steal and hide his own money in an attempt to frame Conker for stealing and treason, and thus get him executed. This plot point will unravel as the story continues, and this will begin the attempt to get rid of Conker for good. But let's get back to Conker. Let's see what he's doing. After escaping the castle jail, Conker goes exploring around, and this is the main bit of the game, just as the first. People just need Conker's help for any random ass scenario, so Conker helps them with whatever they need. I'll go over these kinda quick. First, you go to the castle town, where the iconic Cock and Plucker is. The landlord is having issues with a bunch of rowdy fire imps, so he needs Conker to do what he does best to those imps. The town itself surrounds the castle like a moat, and is described as very dirty and smelly. This town also has rat-infested sewers and an old abandoned church. The main exit of the town is blocked by a gargoyle. Now the next place Conker visits is the familiar Windmill Land, which you may remember as the primary place where the first game took place. It's actually facing very harsh cold weather at the moment, so it's no longer green or vibrant. Places such as Pooh Mountain are gone, and now that it's gone, it turned the surrounding area into a stinking bog. Most of the old exits into the old levels are blocked off, and the windmill itself is undergoing construction. Chris Seavor pokes fun at this, saying maybe Conker will finally get to play the windmill level in this game. The only other main thing to mention about this area is that there's a prince bee now, and he has a new hive defense system, which is essentially a honey fortress, and a dingy forest has also appeared. But now, Conker is really gonna explore the world. Before we do though, let me remind you that one of Conker's most consistent themes is the movie references. There will be a lot of movie references later in the plot, so I'd like to mention this beforehand. Like, look at this emblem that didn't even make it into the document. A school called Hog's Arse, the school for swearing and magic. This was an obvious parody of Harry Potter's Hogwarts. We're getting off topic though, back to the story. The next place Conker visits is the Cheesy Kingdom, which is ruled by Marvin's cousin. This king apparently wears a suit of cheese, which is dope as hell. That is some quality Men's Warehouse apparel. The French cheese we mentioned earlier, Camembert, is rescued here. This kingdom is connected to the old barn from the first game, which is now completely flooded in a no man's land, and there are still rumors that a certain grass cyborg is still lurking beneath the farm. Next location to visit is the Wasp Factory, a huge mechanical honey-making enterprise formed by the infamous Wonka gang, but they lack one important ingredient: hives. Will Conker help them by stealing the hives, or will he stop Wonka's gang from doing so? I don't even fucking know. It doesn't say. But there was going to be a section where Conker rides on the back of bees and shoots people, so take that to your own interpretation. Next area, Clang Bastards. They made a nest for themselves, and what do they do all day? They just move metal around for no apparent reason at all. Just to do it. Just for the fucking rush! Conker needs to actually become a Clang himself in this level, which is described as a moderately painless transition, which personally I have a hard time believing, but whatever. Alright, sick, another area. The Teddy's Other Island. This is a long forgotten Teddy's training island, which was recently discovered by the Squirrel High Command, and they are described as literally like shitting themselves over finding this out. And I don't fucking blame them. Do you remember what happened to them in the first game? This other Teddy's Island is where most of the unused and more horrifying experiments were done by the professor, and Conker would apparently do some aerial combat in this section. Around this part of the story, Conker goes to the Federal Reserve Bank from the first game and meets the Weasel boss, the one who made the deal with the Panther King. They fight, and Conker slays the Weasel boss. This might sound like it's going bad for the Panther King, but in reality, this is just what the Panther King wanted. He double-crossed the Weasel boss and was hoping Conker would win. Because of this, Conker isn't accused of treason, but now murder. So as a result, Conker gets executed, all according to the Panther King's plan. Conker wakes up in the basement, which means he was officially killed off. But he's confused to see a massive thumping nightclub in front of him. He goes inside to see it's being run by the Weasel boss he just killed. And I want to pause for a second. I know he's a successful weasel. He's got mad money and a sprawling business. But you're telling me he built a nightclub, hired staff, then had people actually enter the nightclub all in 5 minutes? That might be the most fucking impressive thing I think I've ever seen someone do. Back to the story though. Conker is just chilling in the nightclub, as you do when you die. And then Greg comes up behind him, just being a toddler, laughing and saying how Conker's dead forever because he got executed. Pretty much just explaining what situation Conker is in. But Greg, being a little bitch, gave us a revelation. Greg mentions that the Panther King has now returned to the world of living thanks to the deal they made. But he's returned to the world of living in Conker's body. The Panther King being in Conker's body made it all grayish and overall more vicious because it's no longer Conker, it's the Panther King. And you know damn well the Panther King is gonna fuck some shit up. But while this is happening, another plotline starts to develop. The professor we thought was dead from the first game has seemed to survive, and it seems he has a familiar face in the tank back there. I wonder what will come of this. Okay, back to the main plot. The Panther King goes out in the world to get the rest of the Weasel boss's money that was hidden. You actually get to play as him, which is pretty cool. And the section where you play as him ends when you finally get all of the cash, and the Panther King reestablishes himself as the king of all the lands. But some of Conker's best buds realize the situation and figure out this isn't their friend Conker, but the evil Panther King. So a fight breaks out. The climactic fight is brutal, a true fight to the death. All of Conker's friends are committed to fight until the end. But it's no use. Commembert, the Raptor, and even our favorite Pitchfork, Frankie, all pass away from this exchange. It was a very tragic loss for our heroes, and everything seems that it's lost. Conker and friends now stuck in the basement. There's no way to win, unless they work together. This begins Conker and friends' mission to fight Greg, Death himself, to have a chance at escaping the basement. On the way, they even see some familiar faces that died in Bad Fur Day. But they find him, Greg, and figure out about a boat named Gigantic, the largest cruise ship in the history of the land. It was declared unsinkable, but you guessed it, it fucking sank. But as a result of it sinking, it now acts as a ferry boat between the life of the living and the dead, and Greg has a season ticket onto the ship. If Conker can get his hand on that ticket, his ass can get out the basement. Greg is not having any of Conker's shit, so he summons the Panther King into the basement to beat Conker in a 2v1 battle. They have a climactic fight, Conker versus Death himself, and the Conker doppelganger. It gets heated, but Conker finds a way to win in the most stressful of times. He remembers Greg's pure hatred for cats, so he beats the fuck out of Death with the power of cats. He then fucks up the Panther King, but Conker realizes if the Panther King stays in the basement, he could team up with Greg again. So he takes the king hostage with him onto the Gigantic, so they can sail back into the world of living. They sail back on the Gigantic, but while on it, Conker meets a girl named Bunni the Rabbit. He seems to have taken a romantic interest in Bunni. Maybe she's the missing piece to Conker being whole, the piece that was taken away when Berri died a couple years back. While the Gigantic is sailing back to the realm of living, it hits a giant operatic pile of poo that sings. Because of this poo mishap, the ship starts sinking. Conker panics and goes to rescue Bunni. He ends up saving her life from certain death, and this really kindles their relationship. Conker and friends were able to make it back into the world of living. And the Panther King, he's cool too, he's alright. Now being alive again, Conker once again sits on the throne. They banish the Panther King to the castle jail that Conker was in earlier today. Conker is now dubbed the Emperor of the known universe, replacing the Panther King after he became Emperor from killing literally everything and everyone. Conker's friends will now plan Conker's wedding with his new girlfriend Bunny, a royal wedding. Conker has a new love and will now spend his days forever happy. Conker finally got the good ending he deserved, as the credits roll. Wait, what the fuck? That's fucking right. There's more. The credits actually start rolling just like they did, but the entire castle shakes and the screen. Conker is confused as fuck. He even asked the programmers, like, what's going on, and they have no clue either. So Conker checks the clock, and he realizes it's only after tea time. So he makes a joke about saying the day hasn't finished yet, so to stop the credits, the game isn't over. Conker quickly rushes over to one of the castle windows to see what's going on, and he looks outside to see a giant fucking metallic starfish hovering over the windmill. This mechanism is known as the Death Starfish, and soon it will destroy the entire world. It's starting a really dramatic countdown, and as it slowly goes down, Conker needs to find a way to beat it before it gets to zero and they all die. So Conker has to act, and fast. Conker goes to check out what's causing all this nonsense. When he arrives, a bunch of teddies are being sent down to Windmill Land from the Death Starfish. So Conker and co fight him off for a little while. While fighting, they see the professor in the distance, which shocks Conker. I mean, Conker witnessed him die in the first game, and Berri too. Conker wonders to himself if Berri could also be alive, but he has no time to think about that. Now that they know the professor is behind this, they rush over to his tower, where he made all of his experiments. But as they enter, even more advanced models of the teddy start attacking. The space teddies. They are dropping from the Death Starfish en masse and are fucking shit up. Conker quickly rushes up to the top of the tower and finds an old rocket the professor built. So without thinking twice, he gets on. Conker wants to end this shit now. He just wants to be happy for once. He wants his marriage to go perfect and settle down with Bunny. Just as Conker dreamed, all he wants to do is be home with Bunny, while having a bottle of beer. Just the simple life. He flies the rocket and arrives onto the Death Starfish. He sees the professor, and in good old Conker fashion, he fucking obliterates him. Easy shit. Conker then destroys the whole Death Starfish itself, saving the world for good. Or so he thought. A familiar face next appears. It's Berri, but as a cyborg. She did survive after all. Conker is going through so many emotions. He doesn't know what to say. But Berri didn't show up to be with Conker again. She showed up to kill him. Now calling herself the Panther Queen, she is the true villain in this tale. The Panther Queen Berri gives us an explanation for everything that has happened here. The professor Conker killed was actually just a robot built by Berri, made to look like the professor. The real professor is unharmed in an undisclosed location. But how did Berri even survive? We saw her die. Well, she tells us. Immediately after getting blown out of the airlock in space in Bad Fur she and the professor were picked up by a passing alien craft, and then the aliens revived both Berri and the professor, allowing them to survive what would have been a fatal situation. While the aliens took care of them, the aliens gave Berri immense technical knowledge, teaching her about a bunch of crazy future science shit. And after taking care of Berri and the professor, the aliens tell them now to go home and to spread the knowledge they gained to everyone on their home planet. But they don't do that. What they do next is go to the moon and start building a base, as well as a plan to raid Earth, for the sole reason of killing Conker. Berri wants revenge for Conker not caring for her enough and letting her die so easily. So she gets the professor to work on a new strand of teddies, being the space teddies, as well as the construction of the Death Starfish. And what Berri herself is doing is constructing the moon base, as well as cloning herself into an almost perfect replica. Her plan with this clone is to be transplanted into it, and thus having her look exactly as she did before the fatal incident. She hasn't fully realized this plan yet though, and currently the clone is still sitting in the tank. Now that the crazy ass, long ass backstory is over, she tells Conker to meet her in the moon base, so they can have their final battle. But the thing is, Conker's shaken by this whole thing. He doesn't want to kill Berri. I mean, he thought she was dead all this time. He missed her so much. Conker is just completely shaken. But he has no choice but to kill her in this scenario. With his own life at risk, and even everyone else around him, he has to accept the challenge. so he does. But he knows this is going to be the hardest fight of his life. So he frees the Panther King from the castle jail, so he can have him as an ally in the final fight against Berri. So, the Panther King and Conker are off. They steal one of the Space Teddy's aircrafts and fly to the moon to confront Berri. They land on the moon and arrive at the base. And at first, Conker sees how small it is and makes a remark on how he thought he would be bigger. But then they enter the building and go underground. And it's actually huge inside. Almost an empire. An insane, crazy-ass moon base. And here is where Conker and the Panther King find Berri. And the final battle commences. Berri, the final boss, the Panther Queen. They struggle. It's a really hard fight. But with their efforts together, they end up defeating her. Killing her off for good. But at the same time, emotionally destroying Conker. This wasn't a hard battle just because of the physical limits, but because of the mental too. But with the threat now truly over, for real this time, they return to Earth. Just in time for Conker and Bunny's marriage. There's a surprise guest waiting for them though. The Berri clone from the tank attends the wedding, but with no recollection of what happened with the real Berri and Conker from the past few days. All of Conker's friends are ready for the marriage, and when Conker returns, he's in shock to see that Bunny is now a zombie. Dead. Just like Berri. But instead of peacefully resting, she's a walking corpse that feeds off brains. Conker is now devoid of any more pain. He chooses to still marry Bunny, even if she's a zombie. Because at the end of the day, she's still the girl he fell in love with. The wedding carries on, Conker agreeing to the marriage. Our best friend Frankie the Pitchfork says, "If anyone knows of any reason why these two should not be wed, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The Berri clone that's attending clears her throat to speak. Then the credits roll. For real this time. And it ends on that cliffhanger. That was the entire plot of Conker's Other Bad Day. And there is some minuscule stuff I left out. But I left it out solely for it not being specific enough for me to talk about, or it clashing with other things that we know happened from the document. And I didn't want to give you guys false information by assuming crap. But Conker's Other Bad Day, huh? It's a tragic story, just like the first. Conker may not be a good guy. He's a shitter, actually. But we also root for him in a way, and want to see him have a happy ending. But the ending was bittersweet. It makes us upset. We want to see him have a happily ever after. But he's doomed to never have one. If you haven't played Conker, or weren't a fan, or even interested, and want to give Bad Fur Day a player watch if you haven't still, I recommend it. This squirrel really is something special. A form of media that's really seen. It's a story where we should appreciate what we have. Honestly, in Bad Fur Day, Conker says it best himself.
So, there I am. King. King of all the land. And who'd have thought that? Not me. I guess you know who these guys are now? 'Cause I certainly do. I don't want to know them. And yep, I may be king. I have all the money in the world. And all the land. And all that stuff. But you know, I don't really think I want it. I just want to go home. With Berri. And, I don't know, have a bottle of beer. It's not gonna happen. It's true what they say. The grass is always greener. And you don't really know what it is you have until it's gone. Gone.